And how's it going, everyone? And welcome to No Fun Alloved's Roundtable. Today we're going to be talking about NPCs, how we use them, how we interact with them, how the players interact with them, and whatever else comes up. Today I am joined by two of my most special patrons, Marshall and Mayhem. Go ahead and say hi, guys.
Greetings, everybody.
General audience.
Alrighty, so yeah, let's go ahead and just kick things off here. So, NPCs are a necessary evil, one could say, in our games because we want to make our worlds feel real, we want to make them feel lived in, but at the same time, we don't want to detract from the PC's agency, we don't want them to feel overshadowed, and most important of all, you don't want it to sit there and roleplay with yourself all day, every day, unless you're into that sort of thing. So, the real question, the first question I want to go over here is, with you guys, is how often do your NPCs interact with the story? Like, let's say, for example, if you have a 3-hour session, how much of that time do you think is taken up by you being an NPC?
Ooh, it really depends upon what the role of that NPC is. It generally it's more at the beginning of the session when if we're to lead somebody, we being the DMs in a particular area or set up the scenario. Yeah, the NPCs are there giving information or there's a conversation in whatever social situation. But after that, in my opinion, it tends to drop off a little bit, but they're always there to interact.
I tend to agree that it would be definitely situational. For my last session, it included a large meal where there was a lot of expository information dumped and trying to mold in one way or the other to see how the party received it. And then the game drastically switched into combat and we didn't have role playing for the second half of the session. It all depends on, to me, what's actually happening in your storyline at that point. If you need the NPC to help push that storyline forward, if not, then the NPC should probably step back and out of the way, I would think. But I use them only when it's needed to push new information out or, to get the party moving in a direction of any kind.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've had to reconcile a lot with in regards of there has to be exposition at some point. Your players have to learn some piece of information, but how much is it overbearing? Is it annoying? Do they particularly like this, one NPC that has to give them this piece of information? It always comes down to these individual situations, and something that I try to do is I'll purposely just shotgun a bunch of NPCs at the players' faces, and inevitably they are going to look at this whole cadre and, say, okay, I like this one the most, and latch onto that one. And then I can, work with the NPC that they like and not have to worry about all the other NPCs.
Right.
Right. I had set up a small market in the stockyard for the game that I'm playing, where I had a couple tents set up and everything in it, and vendors that were selling their wares. Those NPCs I made very, very, very basic. I am not very good at doing voices. 20 years of smoking cigarettes has really hurt me there. I have quit though.
Hey, you can roleplay one hell of a chain smoker though.
I could. And the sad thing is this is what I sound like after quitting 5 years ago. Newports, baby, Newports. But anyway, so I can't do voices very well, but I can stutter and I can do lisps. And unfortunately, that's what I end up using for my market NPCs, just to give them some sort of personality for him to latch on to, something for them to remember. Like you said, I kind of shotgunned out like 6 of them, and they all kind of like the blacksmith who talked like a certain black duck we know.
You just remind me of you. If you were a heavy smoker, and congratulations for quitting, and you've got that deep raspy voice, the first image that popped into my mind is Harvey Firestein, and it's like, okay, you could do a really great one of that. Lean into what you got, man.
There we go. We all play to our strengths, right?
Mm.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. If you experienced a certain, people's cultures, you have a certain inflection with your voice. Yeah, absolutely lean into it for sure. Definitely use your past experiences and current experiences in the game because that is once again going to make the world. It's going to make the world feel lived in.
Yeah.
My thing is that, like, when we get to something, say, a larger metropolitan area where there are a lot of NPCs, say in a pre-written adventure, um, sorting between the primaries, secondaries, and those that you can just pretty much ignore is a difficult task. And I'm not just talking Curse of Strahd that I'm running. I'm looking at a couple of the other books that I have as well. And there's a lot of NPCs in some of them that are almost extra extraneous, and they're not really necessary to move that story. And figuring out how do you, and if I figure out which ones to kind of focus on.
I never try and focus on any NPC because I know deep down back of my head, if I focus on something, then I'm going to have biases.
Well, that's true.
And, that's another thing you got to reconcile with is you are a player at the table. As a DM, you are still a player. It's just that your role is significantly different. You can fall into the trap of having a DM PC, which you don't want. You don't want there to be some NPC that's got a little crown over their head and they can't die, and you protect them and coddle them. You definitely want them to feel just as real as the PCs in a sense. So it's definitely something that I purposely, to avoid getting into those trappings, I simply just throw these characters at the NPCs, or I throw the NPCs at the characters, and then they use them to their own devices, whether they're helping each other, backstabbing each other, whatever the case may be. And if good things come of it, that's awesome. But if bad things come of it, then there's going to be some other NPC that they get to latch on to later.
Okay.
Yeah. And I do not know what that magic is about having, how do you get them involved in that particular NPC? What is it that they really want? I've got no control over that, and I don't understand it. But I mean, I can take the cues. And it's like, oh, they like this one. Okay, well then, counter to what you do, no fun. I will put plot armor, maybe a little bit on some of them because they fall in love with them, But they also get into some trouble, and the PCs will make sacrifices for these NPCs.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's just revivify. No, we have to have that kobold. Really? You met him 5 minutes ago and you fell in love, and you're actually doing revivify to save this kobold.
I've only known him for 5 minutes, but I'll do anything.
And you're revivifying him?
Yes. And it's like, but what is that? What magic is that? I don't know what it is. It's like, okay, well, I guess that NPC has plot armor for a couple of sessions.
It's definitely one of those things where you can sit there and you say, okay, as you walk into the tavern, you see a angelic figure wearing holy armor with a halo over their head and a flaming sword, and then your players ask, but who else is in the tavern? Oh, there's a goblin in the corner. We go talk to that goblin. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
There is nothing you can do. Like, even if you're playing with the same group of people for your entire life, they're still going to do unpredictable things just to screw with you, right? So,
yeah.
Sometimes you sit there and you prep, this holy angelic figure, and then you end up getting Boblin the Goblin joining the party. It just happens.
That's hilarious.
And yeah,
it's true though.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the magic of these games, is we're interacting with these make-believe characters that either you made yourself or you took it from these pre-written adventures or whatever the case may be, and your players latch onto them. But another important thing to consider is that these NPCs, more often than not, are not static characters with the same text of line forever and all the time. If it's like a longer campaign, typically these NPCs will evolve over time, right? Typically they will, be influenced by the PCs, or In the really cool cases, sometimes the PCs will be influenced by the NPC.
Oh.
Have you ever experienced anything like that, where you've been running a longer campaign and the NPCs actually make the PCs either better or worse, or just different?
Interesting. I'm not sure if that's happened. If it has, I can't recall it. I can imagine some situations, but Mayhem, what about you?
Well, in my 8 months of experience as a dungeon master, I can honestly say that I have never influenced a party in a positive manner or a negative manner with an NPC. I just haven't gotten that good yet. But
You will.
like you said, they latch onto the strangest things. They latched onto an orphan child that literally had one line.
No.
And have adopted said child to the point where I wrote an adoption certificate from the church, and the party has all vowed to save the young man, ride or die with their lives. So
Well,
I'm interested to see, and the first thing that the adoptee asked me is, how do I turn him into a rogue?
what?
Yeah.
Yes. So my rogue adopted a 12-year-old child. For those of us who have ever looked at Game of Thrones, we understand how good little kids can be at getting information. I have no idea how to mechanically work this, though.
Well, fortunately for you, a recent inclusion is the it's not henchmen, it's not retainers, it's sidekicks. So
Okay.
sidekicks.
Was that in Tasha's, or where was that?
Yeah, it's in Tasha's. It started as UA, and then it came out in the Essentials Kit, but it's now in Tasha's. And
Okay.
it's a way to grab an NPC and give them some abilities and give them basically a progression, sort of like how the PCs have, where over time they get level ups, they get more HP, they get more abilities. And
Right.
that is another topic that I certainly would love to dive into. Is you can have I've been doing sidekicks for a long time, since, in fact, right from the beginning. It's just that they weren't called sidekicks. I had I would just call them retainers and followers.
Right.
Being one of the first games that I ran was Tomb of Annihilation, and my group, once they got to level 4 and level 5. Then a young man approached them, a young ward, and said, "You guys are awesome. I would love to adventure with you all, but I'm incredibly weak. Can you teach me how to do this?" And what ended up happening, because I was running multiple games of this, the first group that I did this for, they latched onto this character and said, "Hey, you're awesome. We're gonna basically transform you into a supporting healing type character. And it's going to be awesome. You're going to help out the party. It'll be a fun time." And my second group, they immediately saw this young ward join the party, and then they said, he's going to be my class. No, he's going to be my class. No, he's going to be my class. And so all 4 PCs just started fighting each other over trying to transform this guy into the class that they wanted. So having... that is something I strongly recommend, whether this be 5e or specifically if you are running OSR style games, then absolutely this is a must. But I always recommend having a NPC join the party once they reach a certain high level, and then it's going to be, once you hit level 5, you have these awesome heroes. Someone shows up and says, "Hey, can you train me?" I think that's an awesome way to showcase the kind of characters that you have.
So is that pardon me, I don't know the sidekick rules either from you or Tasha's. Is that what a sidekick is at its core versus an NPC is? They have taken something on to train, or is there a little bit more to it?
So with sidekicks in
right.
Tasha's, go ahead and show it off on the thing there. With sidekicks, you have these characters, and typically what it says in there is you can grab any NPC block and transform them into a character that's going to be following the party. And it goes into detail about how you can make a wolf a sidekick. You can make some random sprite a sidekick, or whatever the case may be. I did this before sidekicks were a thing, so I just basically just statted him up as a traditional commoner at first, and then he transformed into whatever he transformed into.
That's
And
where I was going with it.
yeah, and you know and what the sidekick rules are in Tasha's is it goes over, are they going to be a melee type character, and if specifically if they're a melee character, are they more defensive or are they more offensive? Then there's the caster, are they more of an offensive caster or are they a healer? Are they a rogue? And if they're a rogue, then are they like more of a rogue or are they more like a bard? So very simplified rules in there to basically grasp this concept of transforming an NPC into someone that's going to be joining the party and make them on par with the adventure.
Okay.
Yeah, because the way I was working it was, it's like, okay, so we're going to start him out at first level, but we're not going to give him any of the proficiencies you get from that. You know, like on D&D Beyond and the little drop-down blocks, we don't do anything. You have to teach him every one of those, according to the rules in the DMG on how long it takes to teach and how much it costs. And I was like reading this going, it's going to take literal years to get this kid anywhere. So knowing that there's something in Tasha's that it makes a lot more sense than the way I was going to do this for my group, it really does help out. So I'm glad I was here for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't stress enough. I do think that it's really awesome because you can have these characters that are, you know, selfish or just and holy. You can have all these smatterings of different personality types, but it's very unique to see that transform once you give them someone to protect, someone to teach, because you're going to see, you know, if you give this single ward to the party, let's say, this one, you know, you have an established adventuring party, they level 5, 6, whatever, and then you give them exactly one follower, then you're going to see that's, you know, some people are going to be selfish and say, oh, he's going to be like my class. Or you're going to have those other groups where they say, okay, let's go ahead and make him useful to the party. Or maybe your party says, we have no interest in this kind of thing, we don't want to babysit, turn him away. You know, you can it's very unique to see that social aspect coming out of your characters, especially if they do take them on, because then they go from these, you know, murder hobos that wander around the place to now being, you know, parent figures, to now being mentors and guides. And I think that's a really great dynamic to have.
It certainly does give them an investment.
Yes.
And the best part,
Definitely.
of course, is you can turn that investment against them by, of course, you know, tugging on their heartstrings, by killing this follower, kidnapping them, transforming them to evil, you know, whatever the case may be. It's definitely
charming it and turning it at dinner.
Exactly. Like having these NPCs that the players get attached to and using them for your own devices later on is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, so that is a unique thing that I've discovered. You know, I do this for every campaign now. Every single campaign, the group gets some sort of follower that is being trained up by the party. At least they get the opportunity to. In OSR style play, this is a lot more common because in OSR style play, you typically have 2 to 4 retainers or henchmen or followers by your side because you need to, because how the mechanics.
Because that's the way the game works.
But in 5e, we have shied away from that. In 5e, we've basically tried to keep the party as tiny as possible. We tried to not bog things down, and that is unfortunate because we end up playing these games where your players go out into the middle of the wilderness, they go down into a deep, dark dungeon, they climb some mountain, whatever the case may be. But unfortunately, they don't have NPCs to bounce ideas off of. They don't have a way for you as the DM to go ahead and, you know, interact with the party with. And I think that is something that can easily be corrected by just having that one simple follower join the party.
I haven't really thought about that. I know a DM who can easily do a table of 12 players, and I'm just at awe. And he does it very well. And
That's impressive.
I'm struggling at 6, and I'm going, I need to get rid of some people. This is unmanageable. But you're just giving me ideas here of, okay, I don't need a player to have another character in there. And like you said, bounce some ideas off of. They have information. This is wonderful.
Yeah, you know, it's definitely one of those things where if you throw a puzzle at the party, let's say, and your party, and your individual players just suck at puzzles, you can have that NPC show up and just be a voice of reason, or maybe just be an ultimate decider, and be the tiebreaker. You can have these NPCs fill these roles that your players didn't necessarily have. And I definitely agree that having a smaller party is better because it's more manageable. 12 PCs, that's absolutely insane to me. I've done 11, and 11 was too much.
It's magic. I'm just like, how are you doing this? What?
Some people are extra gifted. I believe that plagiarism is the most sincere form of flattery. And I'm not going to lie, I've gone and watched Dragna Carta a lot on his Twice Bitten podcast to get ideas of how to really narrate and whatnot. He's a great inspiration. The way he plays NPCs and everything, you cannot help but get into his characters. And he has some that accompany the party from time to time throughout certain parts of the adventures. And here's my question for both of y'all. How, because it ends up being kind of like a DMPC, because you maintain control of it, but it's with them on the adventure. Like you said, for bouncing ideas off of, for knowledge of the area. Say it's a hard pass that nobody else knows the way to. It's not on a map or something. How do you control that interaction with the party as far as not giving out too much and not leading the party beyond what your guide duties would be?
I definitely think. Go on.
I was going to say it's they have information, and you obviously, as you said, you don't want to bluntly say we must go here. But you could throw in stories of, last summer me and my friend went there, and it was we got out of there just by the skin of our teeth because of whatever happened. This black ooze, it ate half of my friend. It's horrible. And then the party can make a decision. Ooh, that's a black ooze. Maybe we could go it, or maybe we should find the other road around and get to where we need to go. They've got the information. They could just drop it with stories or whatnot. And yes, it's exposition. But as you had said earlier, exposition is a necessary evil.
Yeah. And I think there's another thing to be said about it. Can just be, the farmer says, "Oh yeah, I stumbled across a cave out there in them hills," or it can also be, "Hey, I know that there's something out there. I am not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to give you tiny pieces of information, but you're going to escort me there. And the reason for that is because I have something to gain, you have something to gain. We're going to work together." So you can have those tentative alliances where, not all the information is put on the table, depending on the NPC's interactions with the party so far, depending on what is at stake. You can definitely have those moments of, okay, I'm going to, as the NPC says, all right, I'm going to show you to this location that you need to go to, but once I show you, I'm not going to tell you where it is. I'm going to physically take you there. Once we get there, then you are going to do something for me. You can have those back and forths where you have to, it's like a nice happy relationship. You have to meet each other halfway.
Okay, gotcha. I was wondering because there's a couple areas in the campaign that I'm running where I'm going to have to accompany them for a while, and I know my personality as a person that I tend to try to take charge of any group that I'm in. And I want to 100% make sure I never do that to my party. I don't want the NPC to be running the group. And that's really was my concern about it.
I think,
but if I make
depending
it
on
collaborative results, I think that could help.
I definitely think that there's room for that, though. I definitely think that there's NPCs that can say, hey, I've been to this area, you haven't, I'm taking charge, you're going to listen to what I say. And if your players are on board for that, that's fine. In fact, that actually makes life so much easier. But then you can also have those fun interactions where the group says, all right, guy, you've been there before, but we're the adventurers here, so you're gonna listen to us. And then, depending on the NPC's interactions, depending on if you want to roll for it or not, you can definitely have those fun dynamics of, okay, how about this? I'll show you there, but you guys, you get the final say in certain actions. I'm just going to give you some suggestions, and you can act upon those suggestions or not.
Okay, awesome. That works.
Yeah, for sure. It's NPCs is just such a broad topic because you can have the meek NPCs that follow the party and don't do anything. You can have those NPCs that the players meet with exactly one time to get an exposition dump. It can be the
Yeah.
NPC that starts off as like an ally but is really an antagonist and then eventually maybe a full blown villain. There
He
is
could be your patron, and then it ends up he's using you for nefarious reasons.
exactly right. There's so much to go into with how these NPCs interact with the PCs and how much they dictate the flow of the story. I think I've heard of a few campaigns where the players never interact with NPCs, where it's just a full blown exploration game and there's just monsters that never talk to anyone.
Like we're playing second or AD&D or
Yeah, pretty like you have to be playing like a very
very
singular
railroad game.
entity campaign. But more often than not, whenever we play these campaigns, your players are interacting with awesome NPCs that do awesome things or maybe not awesome things. And it's very important to consider how these NPCs are going to shape the PC's story, more importantly the player's story.
Yeah. I and you we have been talking about DM NPCs. And I would be hard pressed to name multiple instances, but I can very memorably remember one time I gave control of an NPC to a player because they had fallen in love with the PC of the NPC, and it was a situation where they were being threatened, and I just turned over to my player Rachel and I said, okay, at the beginning of the session, here is that NPC that you love so much. Whatever happens tonight, you have control. Here's the stats. Here are some special abilities you can have. Go. And she's just looking at me. It's like, really? It's like, yeah. Here's some special things you can do. And she loved it. Loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, you can transform D&D from just being a single narrative game into being Divinity Original Sin, right? You can definitely have the role play element of it, and then it's completely divorced from the combat element of it, where you're controlling not one just super badass hero, but you're controlling multiple people. And I certainly think that there's a lot of merit to giving your PCs some NPCs to interact with, whether this be a full-blown thing for the entirety of the campaign, or maybe just during certain sections where it actually makes sense. There's a lot of merit to giving them that interaction with the world, because then they'll get a little taste of what you do. They'll maybe grow more of an appreciation for these NPCs. There's a lot of great things to be had with handing over the reins of interacting with all these character sheets and just letting your players do what they do.
Well, it also takes the work off of us, and it's like, oh my gosh, I've got 10 characters I've got to deal with, and it's okay. Here, you control it. Fine, that's one less thing I've got to do. But yes,
I had one of my characters ask, "Hey, what if our character dies, can I become this person?" It was one of the main characters from the campaign I'm in right now, actually, one of the main NPCs. And we talked about it for a little bit, and what I had came up with was that basically that we would have to, there's an overarching storyline that this character would have to still maintain. And you'd have to really play to the ideals, flaws, and bonds that I set you, because it ties back to the original story. And she was like, and there's times where as the DM, I might have to take control of it to do exposition with her, to do a portion of the role playing. But she was actually kind of interested in it because she kind of fell in love with the character.
Yeah.
well, do it and see what happens. I mean,
She just hasn't died yet, but she got really close last session.
Yeah,
Man,
I talked with Mandy Mod about this, but there is definitely a merit to, we sit here and we typically, when we start these campaigns, people just bring character sheets to the table and we integrate them to the campaign. But there's a very, very strong, conversation or argument to be had here about handing characters to your players, whether this be the character concept or an actual character sheet themselves, and handing it to the players and say, okay, this is your character's backstory, this is what your character thinks, but you can kind of go ahead and play around with that and see what happens as we go over the course of this campaign. There is, specifically for a self-contained story where you're not going too many places, you're interacting with the same NPCs all the time. I think that's an absolute blast. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I was like, I'll only kind of take control when I absolutely have to. Otherwise, you are the character, unless I have to make sure the story goes the right way.
Yeah, I'm very careful about taking away players' agency.
No, definitely. I mean, how bored. I mean, as it is, when a player gets knocked down in combat, it's just doing death throws. Other than the fact that there's that chance right there, that is a big deflator to a lot of players. For some reason, when you get knocked down, even though I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep going till you've got all my blood out of me. That's just how I go. And if you saw me, there's no backing down with my characters. But he killed me very quickly in a Candlekeep Mystery. That was fun.
Oh yes, Candlekeep Mysteries. That was certainly that was one heck of a week.
Dude, I don't know how you did that. It was like 17 games in a week.
17 games. It was two. It was one the first day, but two every other day. And NPCs were actually pretty a significant deal in that. Honestly, not to go into any module spoilers or anything of that nature, but for that one, here's little old me. I had to sit there and I had to prep a decent amount of NPCs that the players are going to interact with. I
want to say we had like 4 just in mind, so extrapolate that out, and that's what?
A decent amount, right?
That's 80 to 100 in my guesstimation math here.
I don't know, honestly. I'm doing the whole series right now on it. I'd have to read through it all again, however many NPCs I used, but it's definitely one of those things where I didn't have all the prep time in the world for them, but you don't need all the prep time in the world for it. Especially, I will say, Candlekeep Mysteries did a fantastic job with the NPCs, and this is something I want to talk about next, is a lot of times they give out the ideals, bonds, flaws, and motivations of the NPCs, but sometimes they just have a single sentence or two about their personality. That is something I strongly recommend. If you're going to have an NPC that interacts with the party more than, just a tiny, fraction of a moment, writing out a single sentence about their personality, maybe you just write in a few words about their ideals, bonds, flaws, motivations. They could be just single word, adjectives or verbs, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Whatever works for you as a DM.
Yeah, just writing just one thing down, I promise you will go lengths. Because you write down, this person is aggressive. That's all you write down. Then when it comes to roleplay, you just quickly look at that, and then, okay, they're aggressive when they're talking. Awesome. Just very simple notes to take that will go a significantly long way.
What I've learned that actually helps me, because I forget these, but my players don't, is when they've had an interaction with somebody and there was some negative minor detail that they caught that they didn't like, that I didn't even remember doing. Like, let's just say he was aggressive and rude to it, but it wasn't necessarily the most important thing. They come back with that as the only thing, and they come back really angry and standoffish. I'm like, why are you mad at me? They remember, but I think I explained that poorly, honestly. But they'll remember a small detail of 1 or 2 sentences that I don't. So I've kind of taken to the habit of writing a short little note when these characters have an interaction with them. Only because my memory, again, is quite poor. So the individual interactions are kind of helpful to me.
It's hard to keep up with. I mean, at your start of the adventure, you've got, okay, here's one NPC. You know the name. You've got a good a good idea of their personality and their voice. And wow, 20 sessions later, and that stack of NPCs has grown.
Oh yes. Something I do, and it's a riff off of older editions, but what I typically have is I'll have an NPC have a scale of 1 through 12 the first time they meet the group, and a 1 being that they hate the party's guts, they want to stab them right there on the spot, and a 12 being their ride or dies, they're going to fight for you, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And, depending on the individual character, it's more than likely going to be right there smack dab in the middle. But if it's if the party is awesome, good characters and they meet a noble knight, then maybe it's like a 10 right off the bat. And if it's like a total, scummy person, then maybe it's like a 4 or whatever. And something I like to do is the players interact with the NPC. And after that interaction, I'll go ahead and determine, okay, is the dial going to go up after the interaction? Is it going to go down? Maybe the party said something that was totally mean, and that scale is going to drop down. So maybe I can just go ahead and say, okay, they start off as a 7, but because they kind of insulted him, then maybe that goes down to a 6. Or if they...
genius.
Or if they do something and they reveal, oh yeah, we're totally, we just got done, saving the orphans from that burning building. Then it'll go up if they're, along that scale. And
start to make sacrifices, and they say, "Oh yeah, I'll lend you some money." And this is fantastic, no fun. Good grief!
Yeah,
yeah.
Totally
thank you for that mechanic.
I
was borrowing that as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that out and have it as like a supplement. But that can be stagnant. That can just be you always tick up by 1s, or it could be maybe if your players did something, so drastic, then maybe it goes up by 1d4, or it goes down by 1d4. Maybe instead of it going down just by 1 during the course of a conversation, maybe there's a revelation and then it goes up, by your players saying, oh yeah, we saved the orphans, and then it goes up a little bit. And then your players reveal, oh yeah, but then we let the church burn down, and then it goes down a little bit,
and the orphans were in the church, so it goes down further.
You can definitely have those. Like, I really like the system because, once again, just having that one sentence there about the NPC, and then seeing that number on that track, that the 1 through the 12, that immediately tells me how to roleplay that character in such a small amount of detail. That's what I look for when I'm roleplaying my NPCs.
Do
you give that a specific name? Is that this is my
we call that the NFA method.
I'm gonna have to copyright or something here, but yeah, for sure I'm gonna have this written up. It'll be on the Patreon for sure.
Yeah, man, it's I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna at least throw it out there for a couple of sessions to see how this works out.
Yeah, it's. Because, like we said before, you start off the campaign, yeah, there's like 4 NPCs. Woohoo, I can remember everything. Later down the line, you look back and you're like, oh, crap, I've got 20, 30, 50, 100 NPCs. And, I personally write notes of every single session that I do, so I can't always look back on those. But if it's been a few sessions and I don't, bother rereading that exact session that they interacted with this NPC with, then just seeing that one sentence of that NPC and seeing that score there is a great way for me to just hop into this character's mindset and not have to worry about the terrible, thing of, okay, what the heck did this character do again? Yeah, so, NPCs are definitely the staple of the game. There was war games before D&D, and there was, you adjudicate whatever. But then eventually, later down the line, we discovered, hey, maybe we can, be these random characters in the game that give your characters quests, give them motivations. Maybe these NPCs fight the party, whatever. And we're definitely seeing now in 5e where NPCs are a huge staple of our games. Now more than ever, it is definitely, we're not just in the wilderness, in the dungeon, up on the mountaintop all day, every day. More often than not, our NPCs are interacting with civilization, with other, NPCs and these quest givers and all this other fun stuff. So I think it is really important to have these conversations about what we do with these NPCs, how much they influence the game, and what else we're gonna, do with our time with these NPCs.
Yeah, I'm actually
this is not a small topic.
No, it's not. My mind's just thinking about when he mentioned it, and now I remember what I was thinking earlier. Notes, and he said I go back and read my notes because I always do a session recap as well. And I was figuring I might have to go ahead and send you my notes so you could roast me one time. Because I'm sure there's problems with my notes, but that you could make a whole video out of that.
For sure. Well, I'll tell you what, note taking is a whole nother topic. The OSR is a whole nother topic. All those things are definitely for another day. But I think to go ahead and, start wrapping up NPCs here is, what is it about NPCs that do you think that they should take up more of the campaign, less the campaign? What are your guys' thoughts on, do the NPCs have an influence in the game, or do you think that they should just be dressing for your players to do everything?
I absolutely believe they should have an impact in the game as far as what their decisions are and what consequences of that. In a real world, not every decision is based off of what happens with one small group of people. Things work and change in the world around you. The NPCs I see as the driving force in our game for things that happen off stage. Whether this individual is kidnapping children off stage, or if they're looting your gold as you bring it in from your adventures, or any other actions that they could be taking off stage that could change the world. If you look at a setup like Dragon Heist, there's multiple factions moving all at the same time, correct? That same type of thing happens with NPCs.
Absolutely.
I would say I'm going to take a little different bent. PCs, in my opinion, drive the story. NPCs aid that end goal. Now that's NPCs that are aligned to the PCs. I still count the big bad evil guy or big bad evil gals, enemies. They're still NPCs. They have a different goal and motivation. So for them, they drive the story in a different manner. But I almost always see NPCs as supporting role, whether information or whatnot.
And you clarified what I was saying excellently. So
Okay.
that was probably a little bit better worded than I did, but you had it dead on exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. NPCs can definitely, can and should, affect the game because they are there, right? They exist. It's unrealistic to have these NPCs not influence the game in one way or another. And whether that is directly in front of the PCs, the NPCs, pull the lever, they say the word, they do whatever, or if this is all completely off screen, like you mentioned, they're kidnapping the kids, they're executing the king, whatever these NPCs are doing, they should impact the world, but your players are the ones driving this whole thing along, because it turns out that NPCs doing everything, it's better just to read a book than just have the NPCs do everything. Turns out
It's what it
turns out exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Otherwise we're just sitting around. You're just telling a story to them. So yeah, let them.
Which, that has its own merit, but I will say that's not D&D. So
No, definitely not. That's storytelling.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
But like you said, the big bad end guy is doing something all the time, and that's going to change the world, I think. Things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your PCs should be changing the world. Those NPCs should be changing the world. And those NPCs are certainly an interesting thing to go over. So I think
the PCs have got to be. Oh, go ahead.
No,
the PCs are the focus as always.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, I think that's a pretty nice little talk there on NPCs. Just some things to reflect on in regards of how we use them, where we use them, why we use them. You know, ask yourself these questions, because if you introduce an NPC into the game, you should ask yourself, why are they being introduced? Because undoubtedly your players are going to be asking that same question, right? So why are they in there? What are they doing? How are they doing it? You know, all these things should be discussed. And something I've recommended before, just writing down that single sentence or using some key words and phrases, getting those ideals, bonds, flaws, motivations will easily help you out in role-playing out these characters' actions and motivations. So that is going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Mayhem and Marshall. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. Thank you to my patrons for making this possible. You guys are absolutely fantastic. Thank you so very much. That's going to do it for us, though. Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, everybody. And thank you, NFA, for having us.
Thank you so much. Totally enjoyed it.
Alrighty. Thank you so much for listening, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.